So we are going to take a break because this trial is taking about a 10-minute break. And what we have just heard there, fortunately, we have former Congressman Doug Collins to talk about it, a defense attorney who actually, since we've been sitting here on the Outnumbered couch, has really done more than Harpootlian, the defense attorney, was doing. He was like leading us through it. We are outnumbered, of course. I'm Harris Faulkner. My co-host, Kayleigh McEnany. Joining us on the couch today, Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Rachel Campos Duffy, Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, and again, former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, who is also a criminal defense attorney. Boy, this was like you giving us a primer on how to defend this case. What have been some of the things that stuck out? And it's been hours of testimony now with him, at least about an hour and a half, almost two.
Well, it has. And a little, the criminal justice work that I've done, one of the things that you're trying to do there is after all the prosecutions, because they've had everything. Now it's his time. They've presented their case for the most part. But now you've got to build with that jury that this is a real human being sitting there. This is someone that the prosecution is prescribed to, somebody willing to kill their wife and their son. And now he's having to piece that back. And one of the pieces that we talked about there was some of the inconsistencies. Is there a reason for an inconsistency? Was there, just before they went to break, they talked about the FaceTime issue. All of us have had our phone and went to a FaceTime issue. The attorney went ahead and he asked about that. Have you ever done this by mistake before? That's what they're trying to do now, is to lay in his story.
So let me ask you about that, though, because there were several of these instances. There were Google searches. And then you said to me, you're like, well, everything is timestamped. Yeah. He's going to have to substantiate, well, did you Google the restaurant? Like, what did you do?
Well, and I think that he tried to answer that there. If you heard one of his last statements is I surely wouldn't be doing this if it was he sort of implied it was a mistake. So I think they're trying to portray here someone who's distraught, doesn't know what he's doing. He's really upset. They played the 911 tapes. They're saying, so I think they're trying to build this case that there's a sympathetic figure now, and someone who found their family members dead in a very bad situation. And then also, if you notice there, they also were playing the discussion about the threats against the son.
From the 911 call.
From the 911 tapes, which I think is an interesting, because they said, now you told her about this. Well, yes, I did. Well, how did you do that? And he walked very through that. So again, that's laying out there that somebody else could have been involved in this. And I think with the crime scene, as you've talked about before, that may be it.
Well, and it's critical too, right? I mean, Rachel, I would think it would be critical. In our justice system, there has to be, beyond a reasonable doubt that anybody couldn't, no one else could have done it. So when you have a contaminated crime scene, and everybody has talked about that, from attorneys that we've had on as guests to people who live in that area who are looking at this case, when you have a contaminated crime scene, it can wipe away the ability to figure out whether or not somebody else could have done it. That's why you hear the dispatcher on the 911, we just don't want you touching and moving a lot of things in case there's some evidence and we can find the person.
Right. No, listen, this is an interesting case. I haven't been following it as closely as other people. I've actually been fascinated to know why everyone's so fascinated by the case, frankly. But Leslie brought up such a great point also during the commercial break, that he keeps saying, I didn't intentionally kill my wife or my son. It's like, who talks like that? It's very odd. So, I don't know if it's because he's a lawyer and he does that, or, I mean, most humans don't.
But what does that say to you, though? How does that resonate? Because you actually, I could see the physical.
Yeah, we were like,
you were like, what? Nobody talks like that.
Nobody talks like that. To me, it sounds like, he's a lawyer, and he knows a lot about how this whole system works, and he's trying to cover his bases. But I'm not sure that that's the right tact with the jury.
Yeah. As you watch this, Leslie, and I don't know how glued you have been to this case, but I do know you do a very successful call-in radio show. So I can just hear some of your guests in my head, some of them being attorneys, looking at this and trying to kind of solve it on their own.
Oh, there's so much to say with this. To your point, I think they're just trying to stay a step ahead of what's going to happen and come down on cross. Am I right on that? I think they're trying to, I would agree. Doug and I agreed on way too much in the green room, this and other things we may get to and talk about, but on this, they're trying.
He probably calls into the radio show. He says, hi, this is Bob.
Hi, this is David.
Yeah. That's my brother. So
but look, they need to put a human face on him. We all know it's very risky to put your client on the witness stand. But this is a lawyer, and lawyers can make incredible witnesses. I'm very excited to see what happens on cross. Before you see this man, the jury and those of us who are in the jury of public opinion are looking at, well, there's a lot going on here. Allegedly hired somebody to shoot you in the head. You're got fired from a law firm. You have an addiction. You're broke. Your wife was leaving everything to you. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, and everybody would say, you did it. That's what it points to. But this is not a slam dunk. And by putting him on the stand, they are showing him as a human. You see a man crying. You see the tears flowing. You see the emotion. I love what you said, Doug, during the break here, that they're watching him while they're playing those tapes. So we're not just hearing him, but we're seeing his reaction to him.
And Kaylee, the moment that we started watching together, it was interesting. You pointed out all the inconsistencies in the story, but this humanized him. Are you having like a bifurcated reaction?
I am having absolutely a bifurcated reaction, which I think was the entire intent of the defense. Before I heard from Alex Murdaugh, to your point, Leslie, exactly. You're thinking insurance fraud scheme, tax evasion, financial crimes, the weird, the death, tragic death on the boat of that young girl and the housekeeper. There's just a lot, and it's easy to convict him in the court of public opinion. But the moment he took the stand, and you saw that emotion describing in graphic detail that I don't want to repeat because it was hard to hear one time about what his son looked like. He was inconsolable. He could not speak. He described the way his son looked. And as a parent sitting on a jury, you've got to resonate in some way with that emotion. And when he was asked to describe his son, Paul, he said, you could not be around Paul. You couldn't be around him and not have a good time, as he is completely heartbroken. But then you get to the moment where he's asked this: did you lie to the SLED agent Owen about where you were on the night of June 7th? I did lie to them. Did you lie to Agent Owen about this? I did lie to them. He said multiple times he lied. So you begin to wonder, is this just the best con artist in all of history, showing this emotion any parent can empathize with?
Or is he a psychopath? I mean,
right. Right.
We want to just hear part of what he was saying around what Kaylee's describing. It is the moment where Alex Murdaugh denied killing his wife and son. Let's watch.
Mr. Murdaugh, on June 7th, 2021, did you take this gun or any gun like it and shoot your son Paul in the chest in the feed room at your property off Moselle Road?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh, did you take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh, did you take a 300 blackout, such as this, and fire it into your wife Maggie's leg, torso, or any part of her body?
No, I did not.
Did you shoot a 300 blackout into her head, causing her death?
Mr. Griffin, I didn't shoot my wife or my son anytime. Ever.
Talk to me about the legal efficacy of having him as an attorney. As Rachel pointed out, he would be probably more shrewd than the rest of us in terms of the words he might say, but also just that strong denial.
It was a strong denial. It was also interesting, and I was looking at Leslie when this came out, when his attorney said, blew your son's head off. I mean, that was powerful language right there. And, it evoked a reaction from him. And then he said, no, I did not do that. I think that was an interesting play on words there, not one that you would normally say, well, did you kill him or not? Going back real quickly to the intentional part, remember how he's charged. Intentionality is part of some of these charges. And I'm not saying he's using that word, but you brought it up. So I said, okay, well, maybe that's why he's saying I wouldn't intentionally kill. I don't think it's an affirmation that he did kill them, but it is interesting that he's using a word that is part of the
I also find it interesting. I mean, maybe there's a cultural divide even here on the couch where you're like, did you blow your, I mean, I don't know if I'm a Latino. I'm like, no, of course I didn't blow my wife's head off. Like no, I did not blow my wife's. I mean, yes, there's a certainty about it, but I see a lack of emotion even there that
and that's interesting because that's what the roll of the dice is, right?
It is.
I mean, so attorneys
they better not have a Latina in the jury.
But attorneys are going to know, and how we react is a human thing. I don't know that it's always cultural. But attorneys are going to know. They're going to know that we're all going to react differently. They're going to know that as moms, we're going to have a different reaction seeing, as he called him, Papa, his son on the ground. They know that we're just, you know, as human beings, we're going to be different. And maybe it plays well to know, like I called it strong, you called it strong, you wanted to yell, right? Because we're individual people. I do.
When they did that, Doug and I, right? Okay, I know that, just follow me for a sec. On Instagram, TikTok, one of those things, they have these two twins. Have you seen this? And they're watching Whitney Houston. Right? Yeah. And they did, and I'm not going to sing, don't worry. And but then when she goes, and I, right, and it goes, dun, right? The two twins jump, right? I've watched it like seriously 10 times. It's hysterical. And you and I jumped when the defense attorney described it as blowing your brains out. So either I'm a Latina or we're all on the same page with his reaction to the wording by his own attorney with presented to that question was different than at least three of us just sitting on the couch.
The reaction is one question, but then you ultimately get to the question of what is his motivation. Look, with some of these crimes, putting your mind in the mind of a criminal, why did he engage in insurance fraud? Well, because he wanted to leave money to his son, allegedly. Why did he engage in tax evasion? He wanted to enrich himself. Why would he murder his wife and his son? And what's the answer to that question? I think the prosecution has to answer that question as to what his motivation is.
You're right. And I want to set something up before we go on, because we've been talking about all of those other cases. I think there are like 100 instances of financial fraud and other things that have to do with crimes committed potentially, allegedly against people in his life. You know, all dealing with money, if you will. And all of that, according to the judge today, because this has been going on for about the last 24 hours or so. They've been considering whether or not they're going to put him on the stand. And even up until this morning, the judge said to 54-year-old Alex Murdaugh, you know, if you're going to take the stand to defend yourself, you know, you've got a few more minutes. And they took those few more minutes. And we were all watching America's Newsroom, knowing that at some point he's going to come out and make that decision. I'm going to testify. I want to testify. And that was following all of the talks and everything else. And the judge said today, everything is fair game. So you're right. You can't hide behind, oh, well, my son had that boating accident and the young 19-year-old victim died and other people were hit when he was drunk driving the boat. And there were threats against him and so on and so on. Eventually, he's got to answer for the charges against him.
Yeah, he does have to answer. And, you know, another question I had, because there was that evidentiary decision that I believe the prosecution, it was a blow to them, allowing in some of those financial crimes. How much of this will come in, Doug, you may know, to this? Because we here sitting on the couch, we know about the young girl who was killed. We know about the housekeeper. But the financial crimes, part of that will come in. The other two deaths, I don't think will. So how much will the jury actually hear that we are here assessing?
It's going to be interesting to see, because, again, the defense, if they want to bring it up in any kind of way, they have to measure it in the sense, is this going to help me or hurt me? The prosecution has the same problem. Remember, the prosecution has the beyond reasonable doubt standard here. They have to get this passed. All the defense has to do is get one juror, two jurors on that and say, I can't make sense of this, and I'm not willing to send him to get for a first-degree murder or however they've charged this case. What is interesting, though, and I want to bring back something, because, again, part of this is all playing into it, his background, what he's been through, his drugs addiction, all this stuff. But then there's one thing, when we just talked about his reaction, and I'm not giving an excuse or not excuse, but think about this. It's been 2 years.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's been 2 years. Now, think about this, though. For any of us on anything, when he's now sitting there and he knows he's in the spotlight, and some of this he's hearing again, he's heard it now for 5 or 6 weeks, there is a numbing effect that does happen.
But he wasn't
so
numb when he described coming to the scene.
But But when you're sitting in that stand, you're not gonna have. And I think I just want to be careful here, because we're looking for an exception.
I get what you're saying. I would say that the financial crimes speak to somebody who's not trustworthy to begin with.
Well, he said
let's talk about that.
But
also, is there any? And I'll admit, I've not followed this case as closely as possible as a lot of other people have. Is there any other person in the sphere of the mother and the son's life that would have possibly committed?
Well, that's what they're getting to.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're getting to, and that's why they wanted a scene that would be a lot less contaminated than the crime scene that they got. Look, those cops are walking all over everything. We've known that. Yeah. But Doug, when I first sat down with you, you know, we were off camera at that point because we were still in the trial, which we're told will go back momentarily. So we're starting to digest a little bit of what everybody else in the courtroom has been able to, and we've wanted to. So let me get to this point. When you first sat down, you said, look, he's going to be different now than he was 2 years ago, but the facts won't be any different.
Exactly. They've still got to overcome that. And I think by putting him on the stand, they have made the conscious decision that whatever he can offer on the stand is going to be enough to negate.
Do you think he did it?
At this point, from what I've seen, I'm not going to make an opinion on that. What I've seen so far is the legal wrangle. I want to say, can I just say this for perspective, because there's a lot of things with criminal justice. This is exactly what our system ought to look like. A prosecutorial team doing their job and a defense team doing their job.
Agreed.
And I'm tired of this, and we hear this all the time. Well, the defense attorney just getting them off. That is the purpose of this.
That is their job.
And this is to protect those.
That is such a great point.
And like I said, he may be a liar, but he's not a murderer. If
Yeah,
I'm
but
the
see,
defense attorney,
that's a fair point. That's a fair
all the
point.
time.
But
He
Doug,
said
to
that the reason that he lied to the cops was because he had been taking oxycodone, painkiller, and he was addicted at the time, and that he had, he didn't trust anybody, that he felt paranoid. He used the word paranoia. But he's lied about a lot of things, and I don't know what the drug addiction. I don't know the length of time that he was drug addicted.
He lied about being in the kennel, if you believe a family friend witness who heard a video, heard his voice. This is being in the kennel prior to the murder. Murdaugh denied it.
Yep.
The friend said, no, that's his voice. And then 10 other witnesses said, no, that's his voice. So we're watching this in isolation, but there's all these other witnesses who say, that's a lie, that's a lie.
Well, the other thing is, to your point, and you said this has been a couple of years now, but we all know what a jury is looking for, and they're judging heavily that emotion or lack thereof in that reaction, one. And two, we all know that line, and there are jurors sitting there going, well, you were lying then, are you lying to us now?
Yeah.
Right.